Hi everyone, this is Liz Herbert. I'm an analyst with Forrester Research where I've worked since 2002. Over that time, a lot has changed. Today, the pace of change in the business environment as well as rising customer and employee expectations are at a level that we've never seen before. And we see that that puts a lot of pressure on the procurement function to not only accomplish some of the traditional tasks around cost and risk, but to also contribute to these important top-line growth metrics, customer experience, which correlates with growth and profit, as well as being able to serve the needs of employees who are trying to get their jobs done efficiently. So today I'm excited to share with you a new study that Forrester Consulting recently conducted, where we were able to survey over 200 procurement executives. Now, some of them are top leaders, others are more contributors within the function, and others are simply people who happen to do procurement, even though it may not be their main role. And I think you'll be very interested in hearing the state of procurement today, as well as where it's all going. And I'll make sure that by the end of this session, you have a sense of where procurement should go next that you can take back with you. So with that, I'm going to start with a quiz. I want to ask each of you to think about how procurement is viewed within your company. Are procurement people viewed as cost-cutting, risk mitigators? Are they viewed as adding value to the business? Are they viewed as cutting edge? Are they viewed as being slow or fast? Is procurement a department that people try to avoid at all costs? Now, of course, this is not a real quiz. I'm intending here to get you thinking and get you thinking about how people perceive procurement today. And I'll share with you that what I see with a lot of the clients we work with at Forrester is that procurement is often viewed as an obstacle. That even though procurement's charter is often to save the organization from cost and waste and risk, that in reality, a lot of times procurement is viewed as a bottleneck. And this unfortunately drives bad behavior because executives decide to go outside and do their own sourcing. So with us all thinking about what procurement represents today and what the future could hold, let's move ahead and I'll start sharing with you some of the study. So what we have found is that the right procurement approach, which heavily depends on technology, is the way to achieve not only short-term goals as we're all emerging from the pandemic, but also long-term goals. How can your business thrive, survive, grow, compete, evolve? So I'll start with a data point that we collected in this recent research where we asked respondents to think about their organization's top goals. And we asked them to think about what really matters to the organization. Now you can see that cost came out as the top, but it's not the only important goal. We're finding that when you ask procurement executives about the most important drivers for their corporations, they also mention things such as revenue, such as employee experience and customer experience, and really being able to move the business forward. Of course, simply cutting costs does not make survival. What we see, and I'll give an example from a client that we surveyed for some of our own Forrester research, is that a lot of procurement executives, their top charter is to shave off cost. For example, one of the clients we spoke with had the charter to save 13%, and especially for the company where this woman worked, that was a pretty hefty dollar sum. And that, of course, is important, and especially when the economic uncertainty exists like it does now, we see that cost savings matters. But we know that that has to be in context of some of these other goals. So that was a look at what procurement executives think their overall organization is trying to accomplish. We then also asked what are procurement executives themselves focused on. And here you can see that cost and risk, of course, are near the top. And this is typical. This is what we often see, that a lot of the core capabilities within procurement, whether you talk to a chief procurement officer or someone whose role is supplier management or sourcing and vendor management, that these are characteristics you'll typically see. And we know that these are very important. It's not only about saving money, but one of the key roles that procurement must play is to help mitigate risk. For example, if you look at the Target security breach of a few years back, that was later traced to a supplier. Perhaps more vetting could have been done, perhaps being more particular with what suppliers get access to what data could have possibly had an impact. We've also seen supplier risk in the form of goods and supplies. For example, a number of years ago, there was a paint contamination in Asia, and that became part of toys that were produced all over the world. And so having had more control, more oversight, more visibility into the supplier could have saved brands and even could have saved lives, given that paint contamination in toys can tend to have devastating consequences on children who eat those toys. But you also see in this study that we found that procurement executives are focused on moving to the next generation. So one of the findings, and certainly one that I will speak to more, is that we did see they're focused on these newer ways of doing procurement, including specifically marketplaces. Marketplaces, obviously not a new idea. That's an idea that's been around for a couple of decades. But we're seeing that companies of all types are aggressively investing in using marketplaces more, and also that marketplaces themselves have changed dramatically so that they are able to bring more of a many-to-many collaboration and really achieve some of these goals that procurement executives are trying to hit. So let me now talk a little bit away from the data itself. What we're finding is that procurement's job is getting tougher. We know that procurement is often facing very difficult goals on cost and risk, and often when push comes to shove, that is what procurement executives need to base their decisions around. But we also know that the behaviors within enterprises have changed. While historically a lot of large corporations in particular were very locked down and very controlled about who could do procurement and consequences for people who did under the radar screen buying, we know that small businesses who have to fight harder to compete, as well as even the large businesses who now realize that stifling agility is a threat to their very survival, they're seeing purchasing and procurement going on from all over the enterprise. And especially with modern tools, with the rise of the internet, obviously prevalent now, that's just become far more problematic than it ever was. We also see that a lot of times the procurement executives at a corporation are underfunded. I know with even the largest of large companies, it's not uncommon that the procurement group will be just a handful or a dozen people. Yet they are trying to manage this massive charter of having to deal with procurement of goods, services, technology all over the world in many cases. And we know that one of the reasons why the challenge is getting bigger is because of the pandemic. Of course, this has created a lot of disruption. It's created disruption in manufacturing, so supplies may not be available where you would traditionally buy them from. It's created disruption in logistics, so that even where supplies are available, they maybe can't get to the places you need. And it's also created economic uncertainty. There's more volatility. Closely related to this is the economy. Even before the pandemic, there were warning signs in the economy, particularly in countries like Germany. And when you see economic volatility and uncertainty, this inevitably places additional pressure on procurement. It's likely that more suppliers will go out of business. It's likely that we will see more challenges that procurement needs to deal with and face. And then we also see that there is growing regulation around privacy, of course, all over Europe and all over the world. And what we see is that that has created actually some new hurdles, that some of the approaches that would be taken to really improve procurement become more of a challenge when you have to also do that in the context of privacy. And just to speak a little bit about the resourcing issue, I'll let you know that one of the German clients that we work with has thousands and thousands of suppliers they have to deal with, all with a very small procurement team. One individual that we worked with was responsible for over 1,000 suppliers. So now let me talk about what else this Forrester study found. What we found when we delved into procurement approaches is that they fall short. And as you can see here on this chart, they're falling short in a lot of different areas. They're falling short in terms of the integration. They're falling short in terms of some of the skills. They're falling short in terms of the technology. They're falling short really across the board in a lot of areas that are critical for companies to be able to do procurement effectively, and particularly in the environment that we're all living in today. In fact, when we looked a little bit deeper at that data, we found that 91% of those 268 procurement executives that we surveyed said that their approaches were falling short. That's not a good thing. When we dug a little bit deeper into some of the broad areas that they felt were the biggest challenges, skills and tech came up as the biggest inhibitors. And so those are a couple areas where we see that leading procurement executives need to invest to be able to move their businesses forward. So what exactly do we mean when we talk about moving the business forward and procurement working in this new environment, dealing with the volatility of the pandemic, economic uncertainty, moving away from just cost and risk to cost, risk, growth, experience? Well, we have identified 3 key trends that are shaping the future of procurement. 1 is artificial intelligence and automation. 2 is marketplaces, and 3 is a shift in the metrics to be more about what really matters to the business at the highest degree. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about each of those and give you some ideas that you can take away from here in terms of how you can think about procurement going forward and what kinds of tools and technologies may not only alleviate the challenges you're dealing with, solve some of those shortcomings that we're seeing, but also help take you into the next era of procurement. So the first trend is AI and automation. And what we see here is that procurement processes are becoming more automated and intelligent. And here you see some of the data around exactly what that looks like. What we have found is that the rise of artificial intelligence and automation, where even simple things like perhaps a chatbot that is there to advise someone when they're making a purchase, or things that are more advanced and sophisticated, such as some of the automation that is doing automatic fraud detection. That could be with the suppliers, or that could be with your own employees. If there are people who are doing rogue purchasing, sometimes that's fraud, sometimes that's just someone trying to get their job done. But there's a growing sophistication in the use of automation and artificial intelligence to help procurement executives better achieve their goals. And we heard in this study that by using more automation and artificial intelligence, that they were really able to get to a whole nother level of optimizing spend, of gaining efficiencies, and of improving visibility and eliminating manual effort. Of course, anytime that you eliminate manual effort, you're also reducing human error, which is a good thing. We're also finding that as AI and automation grow, and pretty much every technology vendor on the planet is investing in making their solutions more intelligent, really hard to speak with a software supplier in procurement domain or anywhere else who's not talking about automation, machine learning, AI. What we see is that they are investing at a level that most organizations would never be able to get to on their own. What they're able to do is they're able to cull findings, patterns, learnings from across their whole customer base. And especially if you're working with procurement technology suppliers who deal with more customers than you, that's an added benefit. The innovation that they can bring and the AI and automation that they can bring is based on many use cases, things that your own organization might have a lot of trouble to identify. So one of the key findings we have is to really take a look at how are you not only accessing, but really maximizing what AI and what automation you can bring to procurement. And for most of the clients that we speak with as Forrester, we know that this is a journey that they're on, that AI and automation has to, first of all, exist in the tools that you pick. You want to pair up with suppliers who are innovative here, but also there's a lot of organizational change. You'll typically find organizational resistance, how we've always done things, people who have a lack of trust. I know in a recent customer roundtable I did, that was one of the biggest concerns, is how will we know if there's the right level of trust, and how will we be able to really take this forward and put that faith into this system. But over time, with iteration and with change management, companies can get some great value here. That also helps free up time for other things. One of the challenges where, I mentioned procurement departments are small, they're resource constrained, the more that you can automate some of those basic tasks, which frankly aren't that fun. They're not really what a lot of people want to spend their time on. They're the kind of tasks that make people want to bang their head against the wall. When those go away, the procurement function can actually focus on some of those more strategic goals. The second trend that I mentioned is marketplaces. In this study that Forrester conducted, which we will provide a link to so that you can get the full details of it and all the findings, we found that marketplaces are playing a very important role in procurement. Marketplaces are able to achieve a lot of these benefits that companies and procurement departments are looking for. They're also able to alleviate a lot of those challenges that we've seen. And what I would share with you beyond the study, what we're seeing at Forrester is marketplaces have really come a long way. Now, when I started at Forrester almost 20 years ago, there were a lot of exchanges. We were just coming out of the dot-com era. There were always these marketplaces, but many of them failed. And what we're seeing now is this new era of marketplaces who, first of all, have learned from some of those shortcomings of the past, but also who benefit from a world in which everybody's connected all the time. The way to stay connected has advanced substantially. There are many more standards and integration approaches that make these marketplaces even more valuable. And then you combine that with the trend that I just spoke about, which is artificial intelligence and automation. And you see that marketplaces can be a very powerful source of many-to-many communities where you can source goods, technology, services, and that they can also learn. So modern marketplaces are built with artificial intelligence and automation in. So even though we've identified that as a second trend, that's very related to our first trend of artificial intelligence and automation. And now I'll talk about our third trend. Now that this is moving away from the technology. One of the challenges with really any technology investment is that you need adoption and you typically need change in the way that people think and the way that people work. So if you look at how procurement is evolving, first off, we see that procurement does need to still go farther in areas of cost and risk. Even though, like said, a lot of the low-hanging fruit has already been achieved, there is still more work to do for most of the organizations that we work with around saving more cost, getting more efficiencies, and especially in areas like long-tail spend, really getting more advanced in looking at whether that spend is necessary, whether that spend is done simply because the buyer doesn't know where else to go, doesn't realize there's a cheaper, better alternative. And that's an example of where there's still low-hanging fruit. But as automation and marketplaces and artificial intelligence can take you to that next level of cost savings and risk mitigation, we also see that procurement needs to start focusing on what matters to the business. We believe that coming out of the pandemic and with all of the economic turmoil all over the world, that there will be companies fighting for their life. A lot of them are already there now. And to really survive, procurement has to become a contributor to what really matters to the business. And we know that being able to be agile and flexible and being able to launch new products and services, as well as deliver high levels of employee and customer experience, those are all necessities for a leading business and in many cases for a surviving business. And so what we're advising is not just the technology evolve, but also really think about and work with other executives in the company to think about what should procurement be measured on and how can you really define value beyond cost and risk. So with that, let me wrap up with some recommendations. So first off, we recommend that you target business value add. I just said a lot about that. Now, we know that for a lot of procurement executives, that is a challenge because you're sometimes getting your goals from a CFO or a CIO or from even the CEO, but really communicating that there is a new way of procurement, that procurement has a lot more to offer. The second recommendation is on the technology. When I paint that picture of the future, the role of automation and AI, what we know is that a lot of companies today are operating with outdated procurement systems, a hodgepodge of technology, a hodgepodge of sources, and they will fall short because they do not have the modern technology that enables them to lead in these areas. And the final recommendation is to focus on the right skills. A lot of procurement executives have been coached and have been rewarded on risk aversion and on cost containment, and they'll need help moving into the new area. So I hope this gave you some ideas for where procurement is going. I'll lastly leave you with the study that was recently conducted by Forrester, and you can check it out with the link here. Thanks, everyone.